Hi guys, I recently smelled Followed from the House of Kerosene and I enjoyed what I smelled. I enjoyed its gourmand qualities and also its potency and intensity and its lingering power. So I thought I'd put together a video for you guys and review Followed and compare it with Follow. I haven't spoken a lot about kerosene fragrances on the channel lately, but I did just feature Unknown Pleasures in a coziest winter fragrances video. If you haven't caught that video, please go catch it. But today in this video, I'm going to tell you all about Followed, compare it to how it smells against Follow, and then also do a top 6, I think it's a top 6 kerosene fragrances video for you of the fragrances that I have here from this house. So if you're curious to learn about Followed and kerosene top 6 fragrances, then please stay tuned. Thanks so much for tuning in. This is Sebastian. Yes, today I'm talking about Kerosene's latest fragrance, Followed. Instantly I knew that I was really curious about this fragrance. In fact, I featured the fragrance before it launched in an anticipation video some time ago, like 3-4 months ago. But now I have the fragrance here and instantly enjoyed what I smelled. It's a gourmand, a coffee gourmand here, but definitely very maple syrupy and really potent, really intense. It's interesting. I've been testing this fragrance out, wearing it and enjoying its longevity. And also when you spray it in a room, it kind of lingers on. Like the room smells. Like the last time I sprayed it around the evening time in the studio here. Not this room, but the other room. And then I came back the following day around 12:30 in the afternoon, and I could still smell that kind of coffee maple syrup combo that this fragrance is all about. So very long lasting. It kind of could be even choking, like it has this major intensity. So I'm going to warn you about it because it's a really potent fragrance to me, and it has major lingering power. So if you're into the kind of like really heavy fragrances, beast mode fragrances, I think Followed is going to be it for you. But just a general overview of the fragrances. They are sold at Ministry of Scent. They're local perfume shop here, and they sell kerosene fragrances. I don't see the brand at a lot of different places, but Kerosene has been at Ministry of Scent for quite some time. In fact, several years ago, I met John Pegg, who is the man behind the brand, a perfumer for kerosene fragrances. He came to Tiger Lily Perfumery, which is now Ministry of Scent, and I shot a whole video with John Pegg on the launch of actually Follow. So I'm following up now with Followed. It's a follow-up to Follow, and they're completely different fragrances, I should say. So Followed has notes of coffee, cocoa, caramel, maple syrup, vanilla, and amber. On the other hand, Follow has notes of coffee beans, vanilla, benzoin, tonka, sap, and amber. So in the end, you'll look at the notes, you're thinking, okay, they must smell very much alike, and they might remind you of one another. In fact, when you're wearing them separately, they're going to really remind you of one another. When you test them side by side, they're so different fragrances. First of all, I feel like Follow is not as potent, as intense and dense and heavy as Followed is. Followed seems really beefy, like really lingering. Like that's the thing. It clings on and stays there for a long time, especially, as I said, in rooms. So it's really heavy fragrance, and I know a lot of you like these kind of heavy fragrances, and I think you're gonna have to get your nose on this one. For me, it's very long lasting and really intense. I know everybody's very subjective with performance and things like that, so test it out and see how it works for you. But I feel like this is a very overwhelming fragrance wearing experience. But now that the smell of this fragrance, it's coffee after all. It's also very syrupy, whereas both fragrances are powdery. I feel like Follow is drier in comparison to Followed, which is definitely syrupy, molassesy. Remember, it has maple syrup here in comparison to the sap here in Follow. So when you're wearing them, you'll definitely notice that this is definitely a lot more molassesy. It's really focusing on a lot of maple syrup with coffees. Just imagine brewing brewing some coffee and throwing in a ton of maple syrup, mixing it up kind of a thing. You get this kind of gooey, wet, you know, syrupy concoction. Throwing in that cocoa and caramel, because this followed also has caramel, another kind of gooey consistency in fragrances. As a smell, it's a bit sugary, it's a bit burned. And then of course the vanilla and amber, because it's a very, very ambery fragrance. And of course it's not only really heavy on the coffee and maple syrup, it's got a lot of syrupy qualities and molassesy qualities. Definitely autumn comes to mind here. Also, like the kind of notes that are autumn associated, like pumpkin and maple and syrup and things like that, all kind of reminds me of this kind of a smell here where it's really, really intense with its gourmand qualities, really heavy with the coffee, and of course it's really, really syrupy and molassesy with the maple syrup. So definitely a gourmand with coffee. And also, as I said, lots of maple syrup. It kind of has a uniqueness for this kind of a fragrance, because I haven't smelled anything like this as far as the gourmand goes, because generally it's just a coffee fragrance and then they've added other notes. Sometimes it can be kind of very gourmand, but this is a coffee gourmand for sure, because it's not just about the coffee. Even though it's pretty overwhelming with the coffee, you got all these other notes to support it, to create it into a very, very gourmand concoction that's very, very long lasting and intense and overwhelming. Just keep in mind, this is a room filler for sure. You've got to spray it at your own caution, because a little goes a long way with this particular fragrance. I don't know what it is about it. It's got major, major lingering power, and it's very, very long lasting. For me it is. Now on the other hand, as I said, Follow is more of a coffee fragrance. You do experience the dry coffee. It's drier in comparison to Followed, but also spicier, because when you smell them side by side, a lot of spice kind of comes through with Follow in comparison to Followed. Followed seems sweeter, not as dry, and not as spicy as Follow is. Follow is more coffee, and then the other notes are kind of like supporters, not competing with coffee, and in this case Follow's coffee beans. But then again, Followed is just almost equal amounts of coffee with the cocoa, caramel, maple, you know, the maple syrup, vanilla, and amber. So that's the kind of fragrance it is. That's the kind of differences it is. The fact that they're dry versus syrupy, with Followed being the syrupy one. It's a lot spicier with Follow in comparison to Followed, and definitely a drier coffee experience with the focus on the coffee beans and Follow. Anyway, those are the differences for me. They wear differently for sure, and then I feel like they're kind of offsprings. Followed is an offspring from Follow, and I feel like it's definitely a big bad boy kind of an offspring from Follow. Like they've taken it to the complete beast mode direction with Followed. Anyway, those are my thoughts about Followed and how it compares to Follow. Have you gotten your nose on Followed? Are you a fan of kerosene fragrances? Do let me know, put a comment down below. Let's go and get started with the list. I have 6 total fragrances from the brand, and we're going to start off with the first one. It's Woodhaven, this one right here. So Woodhaven to me is a wood shop come to life in fragrance form. I feel like it's very, very dry and wood shavings fragrance. So if you like the idea of wood shavings, this is definitely the fragrance for you. I have a review of this fragrance on the channel. You can go catch it, but it features notes of bergamot, grapefruit, lemon, black pepper, pink pepper, juniper leaf, ginger root, vetiver, and cedar. So the vetiver and cedar is basically what's really running the show here. But upon initial spray, you do have some lemony, citrusy touches. And then of course some spices come in and some aromatics come in. And then that ginger root really does a nice contrast to the vetiver and cedar root. And it's a nice segue from the citruses to the spices and aromatics, and then to that woodsy notes in the dry down. I've put it here at number 6. Again, I mentioned sometimes woody fragrances tend to get boring. It's not as exciting as other fragrances. Like Followed is a very exciting fragrance for me. It's just, I like the way it smells. It reminds me of autumn, and more like food and desserts and things like that in the autumn. Maybe coffee as well for sure, because it is coffee. But Woodhaven can be a bit boring, at least to me it is. That's why I put it at number 6, because it's mostly about, it's mostly about woods rather than all the other stuff, because it's definitely the Woodhaven is key here. And as I said, it reminds me of like a wood shop come to life. Very dry, dusty, wood shavings idea for Woodhaven. So Woodhaven is 6. So moving on to the 5th fragrance, number 5, it's Walk the Sea. Walk the Sea is a unique ambergris fragrance. It does tend to get animalic, and it also gets smoky here. There's some smokiness running throughout the fragrance, but when you first spray it or wear it and smell it, it's very bright. Sea salt is lots of it here, along with white flowers, so there's this freshness about it. Fresh white flowers and sea salt. So sea salt and the ambergris is what's making this an aquatic marine fragrance, focusing on the sea salt and the ambergris here. And then of course it does have its animalic qualities and some woods and musk as well. So the ambergris in here is the smoky kind and also the animalic kind. So for me, the smokiness kind of makes it a darker fragrance. It's not a big bright beachy fragrance or a marine fragrance, if that makes sense. And even though we've got the sea salt and the white flowers, I feel like the smokiness of the rest of the ingredients or notes in this make for a darker wearing experience. So it's a unique fragrance in that it's animalic with ambergris. It's a unique marine fragrance. It's salty fragrance because it's a darkness. So if you're looking for this kind of a bright, happy, you know, summer, sunshiny marine fragrance, this is not it. But if you like the idea of some darkness, of course, there's brightness with this, of course, but then there's also, you know, the animalic qualities of the ambergris and the salt and things like that. Definitely check out Walk the Sea. I have a full review of that fragrance as well, along with Woodhaven if you haven't caught it. The next fragrance is Unforsaken. Unforsaken is definitely an orange citrus floral bomb. Delicious, and I would say this is delicious. And eventually it settles to a bit of ambery dry down in the dry down for sure, but it's got loads of citruses. This is a really delicious citrus fragrance from Kerosene. Unforsaken features notes of tangerine, clementine, coconut, yuzu, orange blossom, jasmine, ginger, tonka beans, benzoin, and vanilla. And because it has all these citruses and it has the citrus florals, and of course it has an ambery vanillic base, there is that kind of light reminder of something like Love Don't Be Shy from the house of Killian, drawing the blank with the name of that house. And it does have that kind of reminder, so there's definitely that warmth in the base with the amber, the vanilla, and a little bit of that tonka beans. But this is not like a clone or a dupe of that kind of a fragrance. That style, and so that's why it kind of reminds me of it. But this particular fragrance has lots more citruses, whereas the other fragrance I'm talking about is mostly about the citrus flower. And so this is orange blossom, of course, as I said, tangerine and clementine, but it also has the jasmine, and it has this ginger note, so it adds kind of a bit of a zing to it. Really delicious fragrance, Unforsaken at number 4. And then I'm ranking Follow at number 3. Follow is at number 3 because it's a delicious gourmand coffee fragrance. And as I said, compared to Followed, I don't enjoy it as much as Follow, because once I have Followed, I'm kind of like leaving Follow behind, because Followed is so intense and so much more gourmand than the Follow is. It's coffee beans, vanilla, benzoin, tonka beans, sap, and amber. It's drier, it's spicier, it's more about the coffee, and the other notes are a bit more of an afterthought because they're basically supporting the coffee, where the coffee is ruling in this particular fragrance. And then the Followed, as I said, all those notes are kind of fighting with one another, so you have almost an equal amounts of the other notes in addition to the coffee with Followed. So that's why I put Follow at number 3, and then I've put Followed at number 2, and it deserves the number 2 spot because I do enjoy the other fragrance a lot more, and I'll tell you what it is if you don't remember. Followed, as I said, it's really, really heavy, it's really intense, it's definitely a room filler, could even choke you guys. A little goes a long way. It's very, very intense and powdery and molassesy syrupy at the same time. This powder kind of just fills a room, but it's all coffee, cocoa, caramel, maple syrup, vanilla, amber, and I feel like most of the notes are equally against the coffee, so it makes for a coffee gourmand. A very distinct smell with the coffee and the maple syrup. So this is definitely what's running the show, but of course the cocoa comes in, the caramel, vanilla, and amber all come in to kind of help it along to create for definitely a coffee coffee, amber, gourmand. So followed at number 2, and then of course at number 1 it's Unknown Pleasures. This deserves a number 1 spot. I just featured it in a coziest winter fragrances video. Definitely very, very cozy. To me it's like a lemon chiffon cake. I like the contrast. I love lemons to begin with. Love lemons quite a bit, and so lemons against the dessert gourmand notes is so delicious. I enjoy lemony desserts actually. But Unknown Pleasures features notes of Earl Grey tea, lemon, bergamot, honey, tonka beans, caramel, vanilla, and waffle cone. Man, it's delicious. If you haven't tried this one, it's definitely great gourmand. And again, it's a kind of a breath of fresh air against other gourmands where they're all, you know, sweet notes. Here, we've got that amazing lemon to come in to contrast and to add some brightness against all the kind of gourmandish notes. Really, really yummy fragrance. So this is Unknown Pleasures at number 1, and that's the list for you guys. I hope you guys get to try Followed. As I said, it's pretty intense. It's definitely a room filler, and I highly recommend it. If you like syrupy maple syrup coffee combo fragrances, you gotta try it. Really delicious, really long lasting. And anyway guys, that's all I have for you today. Let me know if you're a fan of kerosene fragrances, what your favorite kerosene fragrance is. Of course, I don't have a lot of kerosene fragrance. Of course, I have Unknown Pleasures, but now as a favorite of mine, but now Followed is definitely going to be up there as a favorite of mine as well. But just giving you a warning, some of you can't handle really intense fragrances, you tell me. So this is a big beast, I think. So just be warned. Anyway guys, thanks so much for watching today's video. If you have any questions or comments, please list below. Please like this video, please share it, follow me on Instagram and Facebook, and I'll be back with more videos very soon. Have a good one. Goodbye.